Please the court. Members of the jury, this is a case about the impossible. Impossible theories of the prosecution leading to impossible results. You are here today because Mr. Burns was wrongfully accused of murder and wrongfully accused of armed robbery. The evidence will show he is not guilty. It's simply impossible. My name is Villegas, and I have the honor and pleasure of representing Mr. Burns today in this case. Mr. Burns, he was born here in Meridian, India, and he has served our country in the Army for 4 years. Luckily, he got married to his high school sweetheart, and they had 3 kids. They had John, who's 6, they have David, who's 4, and they have Patsy, who is 3 years old. Unfortunately, Patsy is very sick. She's actually so sick that she has to have an experimental surgery that is expensive and it is time-consuming. But Mr. Burns and his wife are responsible parents. They're good people. And they have chosen and talked about mortgaging their own home, which they own free and clear, to pay for their daughter's surgery, no matter what. In fact, every morning of the weekday, he goes to the state employment agency to look for a job because he doesn't have one right now. He's unemployed. But he doesn't care. Every single morning, this man wakes up and goes to look for a job. Any job that they will offer him, he looks into. Now, he's not perfect. Nobody's perfect. In fact, he does have a record, but he's not ashamed of it. While he was in the Army, he developed an addiction. But he's changed, and he turned his life around. In fact, he got clean. He joined a bowling group, and in fact, he's very good at it. He became a member of the Catholic Church, even became a Knights of Columbus. He's been a model community member. The testimony is going to show something completely different than what the prosecution has showed you. On Saturday, May 9th, Mr. Burns and Mrs. Burns wake up. The kids go to a friend's house. It's just a typical day. He wakes up, he cleans the attic, picks up all the leaves in the front yard, takes the family's car, leaves his car in the carport, and goes to Walmart, goes shopping. While he's there, Mrs. Burns is at home. She knows company's coming over, a friend. So she's straightening up the house, she's picking up clothes, sorting it for the wash. Around 3:30, Mr. Burns comes home. He gets a phone call from his friend, this friend that's going to come over and watch a game. His friend says, I'm running a little bit late, but I'll be there. Mr. Burns says, great, I'm tired anyways. So he goes, he sits down on the couch, grabs a couple of beers, kicks it back for a little bit. 4:30 comes around, his friend shows up. They sit and watch the ball game. The whole time that they were there, his wife was at the house. From 3:30 to 4:30, his wife was inside the house washing laundry. And the testimony will show that he was accounted for. And that his friend was there too. Now Sunday, it's Mother's Day. And Mr. Burns takes the kids and they make breakfast in bed for his wife. And they take the car to get cleaned. It was a good day. Then Monday happens. Monday is the day that a woman is killed at a grocer down the street. It's a little bit of a bad day for Mr. Burns too, because he wakes up, he goes to the employment agency looking for a job, and they tell him that he had 2 jobs today. So he goes and he checks the leads. Both of them are closed. There's no work for him. At the same time, his wife is at home, and she's thinking, I've got all these chores to do. There's one thing that he's been asking me to do for her, badgering me about it. And it's to report a missing gun. One of their guns had gone missing weeks before. She finally took care of it that day. Well, the day passes, and she's at home, and he's at home. She's making dinner. She's got the kids on the table. She's getting ready to serve dinner, and she hears a knock on the door. She goes and she opens the door, and there's a police officer standing there. She's a little shocked. She wasn't expecting that. Neither was he. Neither are the kids. They're getting ready to eat dinner. So she said, okay, why are you here? And the officer says, ma'am, we're here for your husband. He's being accused of a murder of a woman at a grocery store, and he's being accused of armed robbery. That happened just a couple days ago. And of course she's shocked, the kids are shocked, and they're getting ready to eat dinner. And they take him away. He doesn't even get to say goodbye to his children. He spends the night in jail. And that's the last time she sees him. As you listen to the witnesses that we're going to talk to, and the testimony that they're going to give, and the evidence that's going to come up, I want you to remember one thing. And that is the prosecution has a burden in this case. What that means is that they have the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Burns is guilty. They have the duty of excluding all reasonable explanations to prove that my client committed murder and robbery. But they can't. I want you to think of it like this. Think of a long chain. Each link has to be strong for the prosecution to win its case. If one of these chains is not strong enough, there is reasonable doubt, and this chain is not strong enough. My client will not be guilty. And we believe that that is exactly what this case is about. These chains are not strong enough, simply because it is impossible for them to be. The prosecution is going to have you believe a completely different story. They're going to use testimony that says my client and a co-defendant met up at a bar and made plans for a heist, and that my client wanted money. But that's not true. We know it's not true. The testimony will show that's not true. He had plans, he had mortgage, he had kids to take care of, he had so much to lose. He has his wife, his 3 kids, one of whom is going to die. She's so sick. And his house, his whole new life that he just rebuilt. And the fact that he hasn't even seen this co-defendant in 8 years. The co-defendant himself will testify to that. They want you to believe that Mr. Burns gets a throwaway phone, makes a secret phone call to meet up with the co-defendant, and that Mr. Burns himself uses his family car and his family gun, gives it to the co-defendant, and drops him off at a grocery store. But there's no phone records, there's no fingerprints, there's no DNA inside that car. They want you to believe that the victim, Miss Aboud, who was killed, very sadly killed, that her last words pointed to Mr. Burns as the murderer. But the testimony will not show that. Her husband did not say that. He did not testify to that. And lastly, they want you to believe that Mr. Burns is a connected man who is involved in organized crime and gambling, but there's no evidence behind that. You're going to hear from 3 witnesses today on our behalf. The first is Detective Juan Perez. He's been on the Nita Police Force for 11 years, and he will testify that it was not Mr. Burns who was there next to the dying woman. No, it was the co-defendant who was offered a plea deal and got off on a robbery charge. And he's going to be able to tell you how he got Mr. Burns' fingerprints on Mr. Burns' own gun, and how Mrs. Burns' car is involved even in the conversation of this. Next, you're going to hear from Mary Burns, his wife, mother of his children, the love of his life. And she will be able to tell you exactly what happened the days leading up to this event. And lastly, you will hear from Lawrence Roberts himself. This is the friend of Mr. Burns, the man who was actually there, who made phone calls, who there are records of. And he will testify that he was there. And he saw Mr. Burns sitting in his own living room, watching his own TV, drinking his own beer, at the time of this murder. After all of the testimony and evidence, what I ask is that you go back to the deliberation room and that you use your common sense and think about what is possible and what's impossible in this case. It's not possible that Mr. Burns is a murderer who killed a woman he doesn't even know. And it's impossible that he was involved in an armed robbery. And at the end of this trial, I ask that you return a verdict of not guilty.